Now the Audi Q8 has always been thought of as that fun, stylish alternative to the Q7. But from every time we've driven it, and given that it's also fairly popular, we think that its appeal might just be unique. And given that there's a new one out, let's see if that sense holds true. Now start driving the Audi Q8 and it's pretty easy to get used to, especially considering it's quite a big wide car. Now that's mainly due to the good visibility that you have out of it because of this wide windscreen, and generally the square shape that helps in this regard. The large windows, that also helps. You don't sit very high up, you don't sit very low. You have that SUV-ish feel to it. So in that sense it's all good. But the highlight for me has to be this engine. Now it's not new, it's been carried over from the last model, but just in the way it functions is so impressive. Now you have a 3-litre V6 that makes 340 PS and 500 Newton meters. Yeah, so it's not anywhere close to the highly strung engines that you have in some other manufacturers. And that's no bad thing because that 500 Nm of torque comes in at just 1400 RPM, which means that you never really get the sense that this engine is turbocharged. Yes, it's not as responsive as say a naturally aspirated engine would be, but you always have torque. So even in stop-start traffic, the big displacement and this sort of trait of this engine means that you don't stutter, you're not, waiting for that engine to spool up. The drive modes also do their bit. They notably change engine response that helps in various situations. Sport mode amps things up without feeling peaky. Efficiency isn't too restrictive but maximizes consumption. As for the numbers, the Q8 managed a 0 to 100 kmph time of 6.1 seconds in our testing, while the rolling acceleration times were brisk too. And that really does make for really luxurious driving. And then of course the refinement sort of adds to this sense. It's especially quiet. Only when you're revving it out closer to the red line is when you hear it. And even then it's quite a soft sort of grumble, but it's not intrusive and it doesn't really get in the way. And then of course when you want to go faster, you have a wide power band, you have a lot of performance. That torque just keeps going. So at highway speeds it has that long-legged feel. The 8-speed ZF gearbox is as usual great, especially in calmer driving. It always keeps the engine on the boil, shifts are seamless more or less, and in brisk driving it seems up to the job of matching the engine's energy. In heavy driving with the sport mode, it has a fun sharp edge to the shifts, but you do notice that it starts to hesitate a bit to drop gears, which it doesn't seem to do in some of the other cars it's fitted to. But this is not much of a problem in the larger scheme of things. Now, big change with this update is that Audi has removed the air suspension that was available with the Q8 earlier, and now you get steel springs with adjustable dampers. Now I must say that Audi has done a good job of it. So even with these quite low profile 21-inch wheels, it handles everything that our roads have to offer. So of course it has that solid, dependable feel that you get from these German cars. But over bad patches, it's not especially firm, so you don't feel uncomfortable. There's great stability on highways and the Q8 handles undulations without losing composure. You get a substantial flowing luxury car demeanor which adds to the overall refinement. Now where you do notice it to be somewhat lacking is say around bends or just when you're driving along say on a slightly winding road. Now that is because the body roll isn't as well controlled. The earlier Q8 would sort of lower itself a little bit on its springs, but that doesn't happen in this car anymore. So you do notice that there's some body roll, there's a bit of dive and pitch around winding road. Now despite this, the Q8 is still an enjoyable car to drive. You have this very strong chassis, you have that Quattro system which is rear bias, 70% of the power usually goes to the back wheels, and it just makes for a confident driving experience. Now the steering also helps with it. It's not especially responsive or reactive, but it's direct, it's precise, it's well weighted. So again, it just goes with that sense of being very competent, of being enjoyable but not too hard edge for someone who's just looking for a nice comfortable luxury car. And then of course I must mention the brakes. Considering this is a big heavy car, we managed to get a really good time with the braking. So in terms of stopping distances too, the Q8 does well. Stepping into the 2024 Audi Q8, the frameless doors with their soft close function create a sense of occasion. But once inside, there's not much that has changed. But this is not necessarily a bad thing. This space continues to feel contemporary and built to the standard you expect at this price. So that crisp angular look with the technical theme continues with the full width style vents, the discreet ambient lighting, and the Quattro badge that sits on the dash face. Just this layout now, it's not the most modern anymore, to be honest. You have cars with much bigger screens now. Now this screen with that haptic feedback, it's not as difficult to use as some of the new fully touch sensitive panels that you get. So it's a sort of middle ground between having fully hard buttons and the new screens, and that's alright in my opinion. And these two, having now used a lot of these big touch screens, I find that this screen here is not that much of a problem, especially with the haptic feedback. But I must say that Audi has still thought of it. And while I would have liked the new physical climate controls that have come back in a few new Audis to have come back here, you still get some hard buttons like for the drive selector, for the volume control, for the parking cameras and so on, which is good. Now having said that, the rest of the cabin, at least at first glance, also feels as well put together as you would expect in an Audi. There's a good deal of heft to all the controls, same with all the window controls here. But having said that, there are some misses. For example, the plastics in the lower half, especially around the bottle holders, they really could have been of a better grade. There's no felt lining, and that's something you find in lesser VW group brands. I also would have liked maybe a power adjustment for the steering column, but I feel like practicality in itself could have been slightly better. The pockets, like I mentioned earlier, they are not too big, and even this space here, while you do get a wireless charger function here now, it's not very big, so you can't really hold stuff in this space all that much. Here's a look at the features that you get with the new Q8 and some of the ones that you don't. There's also more safety equipment on offer now, but we would have liked to have seen ADAS at this price point. Now, unlike many other coupe SUVs, the rear seat of the Q8 doesn't feel like a compromise at all. In fact, it feels pretty lavish in here. To start with, the wheelbase at 2995mm is only 4mm less than the Q7, and you have only 2 rows of seats to fill. So that means you have a huge amount of legroom and kneeroom, as you can see. And given that the sloping roof isn't too abrupt, there's a good deal of headroom as well, and Audi has scooped out this portion here. So even with the panoramic sunroof, I have a good deal of space, and even if you're close to 6 feet, you should be able to fit here. And then we'll come to the comfort itself. Now the seats, they are pretty comfortable. They may not be the best in this segment, but they do get the job done. These slight extensions, they add to your underside support, and these squabs here, the way they're designed, they do hold you in place in, say, faster driving. And then of course you have this armrest here, which is again padded, so that's comfortable. And you have these cup holders, but I think they're a bit too small to hold anything other than small, maybe cans of drinks or something like that. Now we'll come to the amenities. Of course, I spoke of the panoramic sunroof, but this place is quite well packed. You get these powered sunshades and some unique bits. For example, you get a ashtray here. This car has a smoker's pack, so that's why it's there. And the rear sunshade, that's something you don't see very often in cars these days. And then of course you have a 4-zone climate control and these nets here. And yeah, AC vents here and speakers everywhere of that Bang & Olufsen audio system here and even here. Now another function that's somewhat unique in this shape of car, but actually pretty common in Audis, is that this seat slides forward, so you can free up a bit more boot space, or quite a bit if you wanted to. And there's also a slight recline. Now it's not much, but it does make for a slightly more comfortable position to sit in. Having said that, there are some bits that I don't like. The middle seat, it's not going to be comfortable if you have to share space here. As you can see, there's this huge central tunnel and the squab sort of dips in here, so it's really not, and you sit a bit higher up from the other 2 seats, so it's not going to be comfortable if you're in the middle seat here. But a stark miss is that there are no USB chargers here, and Audi could have provided a rear seat entertainment package as standard. The Q8 has aged well. It looks as contemporary as any of its peers, and the small changes that have been made do enough to freshen up the look. These come in the form of the new laser lighting, giving the face a sharper look and a wider sense. The configurable light signatures are a simple way to stand out and a great party trick. Some of the gloss black around the grille and lighting has also been done away with. The grille itself has been updated with a touch more chrome and a more open look that draws more attention than before. Finally, the bumpers have been reworked. The Q8 still has a square stance and the taut proportions that make it quite the bruiser to look at. The red calipers and the new design for the 21-inch wheels add to this sense. In keeping with the functional but still aggressive sense, the Q8 doesn't do a heavily raked roofline like in most other coupe-styled SUVs. The roof is quite flat but then ends in a slight step under the windscreen that does have good benefits on the inside. The rear light cluster has new details now that further reduce bulk, and the new 2D white Audi logo has a neat retro sense to it. Now, the sense that Audi has given some thought to practicality even with this coupe SUV is best seen in the Q8's boot space. Now, to start with, it's 605 litres, which is quite large, and the space itself, the opening is pretty wide and it's deep and square, so big items will fit easily. And if that wasn't enough, you can also fold down the last row of seats. Now, there are some amenities here too. You get a 12-volt charger, few of these nets, this sliding cover here. One feature that we do miss here is quite an important one. You don't get a spare wheel, there's just a tire inflator kit. Priced at Rs 1.17 crore, the Audi Q8 now comes in a single variant that has brought more value. It undercuts the competition while you do lose out on some tech and amenities. This is an honest all-round luxury SUV that has appeal. It drives well for most needs, has a comfortable cabin, carries the presence it needs to.